How to effectively train subordinates. There is a saying that goes, teach employees well, and the boss will have an easy time. You, as the mentor, are more experienced than your subordinates and are responsible for guiding them. For new employees, you want them to become independent as soon as possible, while for older employees, you may want them to take on more complex tasks. The process of guiding your subordinates is also the process of training them. As a manager, it is necessary to learn some training skills. The forward formula for training subordinates. I will share a classic training method widely used in the training industry and apply it to your daily guidance of subordinates. This method can be summarized in 4 phrases. I speak, you listen. You speak, I listen. I do, you watch. And you do, I watch. The first action is I speak, you listen, which is verbal guidance. The key to this step is to provide clear instructions. You can follow 3 steps to make things clear: what, why, and how. What refers to the task you want your subordinate to do. Why refers to the significance of this task for the company or for the individual, and how important it is. How refers to your suggestions on how to do it, step by step. The final step is to help your subordinate break down the task, establish a process, and emphasize the key points. This process may seem simple, but in reality, you may not be able to explain every point clearly every time. For example, as a sales director for major clients, you want a new sales representative to make a collection call to a client. It's just a phone call, right? You might say, Jack, remind a few major clients to pay. Then you leave. But Jack can't execute your command. He doesn't know what the consequences are if the client doesn't pay on time. What if the client refuses? But Jack is afraid to ask too many questions because he thinks you'll think he can't handle something so simple. So he reluctantly makes the call and ends up offending an old client because he didn't know how to speak appropriately. If you follow the 3 steps mentioned above, you can say, Jack, I need you to make a collection call to a few major clients today and remind them to pay. This is the what? Providing basic information. Then you need to tell your subordinate why you assigned this task and make him or her take it seriously. For example, you can say, Jack, collecting payments from clients is very important for the company's operations. Otherwise, the company's cash flow may be disrupted. A competent salesperson should not only be able to sell products but also collect payments in a timely manner. You have performed well in external sales, and now you need to learn how to collect payments. This is the why, pointing out both the company's and the subordinate's interests. Next, you can't just let Jack pick up the phone and make the call. You need to break down the specific steps for him or her. For example, you need to first understand the client's payment history, then find the person responsible for making payment decisions, and finally make the collection call. When it comes to communicating with clients on the phone, you should also inform your subordinates of common precautions. Only then can they truly understand how to handle the matter at hand. Completing the I speak, you listen approach is sometimes insufficient, and you need to add you speak, I listen. On the one hand, many experiences and skills that you consider common sense may not be immediately clear to newcomers. On the other hand, subordinates may be afraid to ask if they do not understand, fearing that you will think they are unintelligent. Of course, at this stage, you do not need to be so blunt as to say, repeat it to me. Instead, you can switch the steps and principles to specific scenarios, allowing subordinates to express their opinions and raise their questions. For example, you can ask Jack, so if you were to call client A, what would you do? Jack can then analyze the client's payment records, key decision makers, and assume several possible objections that may arise during the call, and you can provide your advice accordingly. Do not think that the I speak, you listen, you speak, I listen approach is too troublesome. The founder of the Japanese convenience store 7-Eleven, Toshifumi Suzuki, even proposed that he and his subordinates repeat things 3 times when assigning tasks. He says it once, the subordinate repeats it, and just as he is about to leave, he calls the person back to listen to them say it again. Some managers like to show off their authority and always say, "This is a small matter, don't make me say it a second time." Unfortunately, most subordinates, like you and me, are ordinary people and not mind readers. The third action is, I do, you watch. This means demonstrating personally. For most slightly more complex tasks, when subordinates first encounter them, you need to demonstrate them personally. It is important to note that demonstrating personally does not mean doing it yourself. The focus of the demonstration is to ensure that subordinates can see and learn, so you should follow strict procedures and steps to ensure that subordinates learn good work habits. This step pursues a replicable work method, not just doing things the way you find convenient. In fact, demonstrating personally not only shows subordinates what to do, but also allows you to stay in touch with frontline work. Many times, only when you do it yourself will you see where the problems are and know how to optimize the process. It is also easier to build trust among subordinates. So, using the previous example, you can actually make a phone call to the client in front of Jack, demonstrating the entire communication process. This way, it will be easier for subordinates to grasp the process. So, when the superior has finished and the subordinate has seen it, is it over? Of course not. Just like we can never learn to swim without getting into the pool, it is difficult for subordinates to learn by watching. So there is also the step of you do, I watch. This means working with subordinates, observing them, and providing feedback afterwards. During this process, you need to remind yourself not to fall into two states. One is having too much controlled desire, always interrupting subordinates when observing them. What you need to do is record the problems and provide feedback afterwards. Sometimes you need to find an opportunity to let subordinates fail hard once, so they remember it well. The other is being too soft-hearted. For example, if there are 5 steps in the work process and the subordinate skips one, and nothing seems to go wrong, you may let it go. But the correct approach is to point it out and make them go through all 5 steps again. I greatly appreciate the perspective of Huawei CEO Ren Jingfei. First solidify, then optimize, and finally solidify again. Especially for new employees, the focus should not be on innovation, but rather on following the processes and procedures diligently. After observing their performance, provide feedback that consists of 3 parts: areas of excellence, areas for improvement, and a plan for the next steps. When giving feedback, it is important to let the subordinates speak first, and then provide your own comments. This approach has 2 benefits. It allows you time to observe and understand their thought process, and it reduces the natural resistance people have to criticism and suggestions. It is important to identify specific behaviors that are hindering performance. For example, I once had a sales manager who performed well in all aspects except for sales results. Customers often complained about her communication skills, but this feedback was too vague. Was it a problem with listening or expressing herself? Was it written or verbal communication? In meetings, I thought her communication was normal. However, when I accompanied her on a customer visit, I immediately noticed that she was easily emotionally triggered during negotiations. Negotiations often involve intentional pressure and even personal attacks from unprofessional counterparts. It was clear that her emotional control during communication was the issue. Once you identify the problem, the first step is to make the employee aware of it and then provide targeted guidance and training, including recommending external learning and training resources. If you notice significant issues that could affect their career development, do not hesitate to point them out. Being honest and direct will make them appreciate you. Finally, it is important to recognize that training is a scenario for building a psychological contract between you and your subordinate. In other words, you need to make it clear that you are developing them while they help you get things done. As they help you achieve your goals, their own abilities will also improve, and they will benefit as well.